Hey guys, what's up? It's Stacking Chairs, a youth ministry podcast all about serving in youth ministry, whether it be youth group or youth camp, whatever God has you serving in, that's what we're talking about. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Paul Hamus. I am joined by not my co-host today, guys, but I am not by myself. Kyle could not join us today, but I am joined by my two good friends, Jake and Emily Smith. They are serving with Word of Life in Taiwan. Guys, how's it going today?
It's going swell.
Going swell. Jake?
It's going great. We overcame jet lag. Got here about a week ago.
Overcame jet lag?
Yeah, for a while I was like, my family would be like, if we haven't seen you in 5 years, we want to hang out. And then 7 p.m. I'd be like just asleep. And then I would feel bad.
Yeah.
His mom's boyfriend was making dinner for me one night, and I woke up the next morning and I felt terrible.
Oh, he like made you dinner and you...
He was making it and I was on the couch and I guess I was out.
Yeah,
but I don't remember falling asleep, but I did. I woke up the next morning. It was the only family dinner with him too.
And so it was breakfast then as well.
Yeah, it worked out good.
So how long have you guys been back here in the U.S.?
Probably about
10
days, I think, because we did, I think 10 days.
I
10 days,
some
right?
days, clearly.
It's
You
hard
slept
to
right
know.
through them. Emily slept right through the days. Yeah. So guys, we're going to be talking today about youth ministry, obviously, as we do every week. But today we're going to be talking about the difference between cultures in youth ministry. So Jake and Emily have a very unique experience, I would say, being in another culture, Taiwan. And I want you guys to just tell me a little bit about yourselves. Tell me how you both ended up in Taiwan. Maybe even tell us how you guys met.
Yeah. So I'm from Seattle, which is very far away from where Emily is from. She's from Florida. And so we actually met.
Oh, we're in Florida.
Yeah.
You're from Florida.
I'm
Yeah.
from Florida.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And we actually met in Taiwan while I was doing Word of Life has the CCI program. At the time, it was called MI. And we were kind of the guinea pigs, the first ones to do it. And I was just wrapping up my time. And then Emily was on a 3-month missions trip. And we met in Taiwan. But yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting story. She's a good teller of that, though. But
Yeah. So I was a student here in Florida.
Yeah.
And I had already done like some college like beforehand. So I wasn't really sure like what I wanted to do next because I kind of did Word of Life after college. Most people do it before.
Yeah.
And I was at missions conference in Florida and somebody was presenting about SYME in Japan. And I felt like that was such like a fascinating ministry.
Yeah.
Because they use the Bible to teach English, but like the Bible was like the textbook to teach English. And I'm like, that's such a cool concept to like reach people.
Yeah. Can you tell us what SYME, because there's a lot of people who don't know.
Yeah. So SYME, it's in a few countries and in Chinese, it stands for S is Shenjing, Y Yo Yi, M Menchuan, and E is Ingwen, which is Bible, friendship, discipleship, English. So essentially, students come to an SYME program for 8 weeks at a time. And they study the Word of God to learn English.
Yeah,
and a lot of the students are not Christians. They come from like a lot of Buddhist backgrounds and things. But in those religions, it's syncretic. So you could believe in multiple gods. So they have no problem learning about Jesus. And then we tell them about Jesus.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so I kept applying for this like internship in Japan and they just kept saying no. And I was kind of bummed about it. And then they told me, they're like, we have a spot in Taiwan. But I really knew nothing about Taiwan. I didn't even know it was a country at the time. It's like...
Oh, really?
Yeah, literally nothing.
Oh, wow.
And I have a journal, and I'll never get rid of it because it literally has 7 pages titled Reasons I'm Never Going to Taiwan. It was just a list. I had so many reasons not to go. But I finally said, all right, sure, I'll go. And there was one Taiwanese student at the BI that year, and his name was Paul. And I went up to him one day and I was like, Paul, I'm going to go to your country next year. Can you like tell me something about it? And he starts crying. And I'm like, I'm going to be the worst missionary ever. I'm just offending him. I don't know anything about his culture. But then he goes on to tell me that he had been praying for me like all year to go to Taiwan to like reach his people is how he said it. And I was like really like moved by that because it was like the first time in my life that I saw like God answer such a specific prayer that somebody else had been praying over my life, but I hardly even knew him. And I was like, this is so weird. And so I ended up going like 3 days in. I was like, Rosetta Stone does not work. Chinese is really hard. Like I was afraid of every food that was like placed in front of me. I was like, this is awful. Hated it.
Yeah.
And I like went into Jake's office like on day 3 and I was like, you're an American and you speak English and I need a friend. And so that's how we met. And he really, during those few months, he really like took me under his wing and like taught me like just how to do ministry like in Taiwan. And I ended up falling in love with the place. And towards the end of my trip, like Jake was like, hey, like, I don't want to like offend you, but like, why did you come here? Like, you really like knew nothing. And I was like, well, I don't know, but there's this kid named Paul that's been praying for me. So I think that's why I'm here, is the Lord just answering his prayers. And, but it was really cool because later on we got to connect some dots, and Jake actually led Paul to the Lord in Taiwan. And then Paul got saved there at SYME, and then he decided to come and study the Bible at the BI in the States. And
no way.
And now he's one of our supporters.
And he came here to the Bible Institute here in Florida then.
Yeah.
We saw him on the wall down there. He's on one of the photos.
No way.
Yeah.
I never knew that story. That's incredible.
So now he supports us, and we're all good friends, and so it's good.
Wow. So you fell in love with Taiwan. You fell in love with Jake.
We didn't, I thought he was really old at the time. I was like, I still had teen attached to my like number, and I was like,
that sounds worse in context of nobody knowing my age.
He's only 6 years older.
I'm 5 years older. 6.
No, you're 6 years older.
I was like 5 years, 6 months. It's like some change, but yeah. So we have a big enough age difference. So we didn't date at first. Actually, we knew each other for a couple of years, and then just kind of well. Also, we signed up for the same missions trip independently without realizing it. So we signed up for the world after Taiwan, because she was too young to go on it. She was you had to be 21, and I think you were 20 at the time, and I was
19.
And so we ended up basically on the same team traveling to 11 countries across the world, and she was the only person I knew, and it was kind of kind of funny. Like, so.
At that point, I was like, well, God, if I keep finding him in every country besides America, maybe I should marry him.
And we'd be married in like about a week and a half for 7 years. So.
Oh, wow. Congratulations, you guys. Yeah, that's crazy. That's incredible.
Makes me feel old.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, now it's your turn.
I know. I have a thing with age. I don't know. I don't want to age.
No, I feel that. I'm getting closer to 30, and the closer I get, the more terrifying it feels.
That's me. I'm 29, and I'm like terrified. I'm don't want to be 30.
You want a total trip here? Toby, who was the discipleship coordinator here, and he's in charge of a lot of the guys. He was my camper when he was like 6 or 7.
Oh, wow. And now he's 21.
Yeah. Internally, though, I still feel like I'm like 22. But then time just goes on, and you're like, I'm not 22.
No. That's so funny. So that's the perfect segue, I think, of, hey, we don't really realize how old we are. Maybe some other things we don't realize. I'm usually really good at these segue things. I just botched that one big time. So I'm just going to go into our subject. It was beautiful. The plane
took off. It didn't land.
Yeah, no, it just up and back down.
Honestly, when humans flew the first time, everybody did clap. Even if it didn't land the plane well, people were like, that's true.
I'm like the Wright brothers of segues. Transition in segues. Okay, so today we want to talk about how you guys do youth ministry in another culture. I got to hear a little bit about it before the episode, and I guess I'll throw a wide net here to start. What's been some of the biggest challenges, or what are some of the things you guys have noticed about just trying to reach kids in another culture?
I think for Taiwan, one of the biggest challenges is that their age of identifying youth isn't the same. So,
really?
If you want to do youth ministry in Taiwan, we tend to actually work with people who are till about age 25. Because in the Taiwanese sort of family system, the maturity of people is probably more mature than an American. So like they're age 14, they're really disciplined, getting good grades, they're making good decisions. But then the independence is significantly delayed. So they're still asking their parents at age 25, even age 30 for permission to do things. And so students who are under 18, it's hard to get their time because a lot of times they're so underneath their parents' authority. A lot of times what they're doing is going to school, and then after school at like 5:30 p.m., they go to another school and almost no free time. So youth ministry is very difficult in local churches because the reality is most people don't want to do anything that doesn't add a lot of educational value. And so a lot of our most successful ministries have to do with English camps or maybe working with college-age students. But it's interesting because they've learned these skills. So when they turn 18 and they go off to college, a lot of Americans, they get this whole like, this is so hard. I'm writing all these difficult papers. Yeah. But a lot of the Taiwanese, they're so disciplined that college is actually significantly easier for them. And that's actually the time they get to be free and find out who they are. And it's kind of
So your youth ministry is kind of like between the ages of like 18 and 25 then.
Yeah. And sometimes we have done camps for like younger like students, but even that gets a little bit challenging because if we like host a summer camp in America, it's like you advertise with like, we're going to do slip and slides and like all these games. We're going to have this great speaker and music. Yeah. And in Taiwan, it's like, we're going to have 6 hours of studying. And that's
English.
And that's like what will make like the students come because their parents will like allow them to come. So our camps are very chill, like comparatively. It's at most like a good VBS.
So what's like the youngest age you've gotten to come to like an English camp then?
We've done English camps like 5-year-olds before. So
they don't know any English. You're just talking to them in English and they're just like, so that's okay.
Is that actually like Taiwanese or
Chinese?
But, Chinese, sorry.
But they're the Taiwanese is also a language. You're not
so
you're not foolish to think that.
Okay, I thought so, and then I was like,
it's actually Taiwanese is a language that's kind of a dialect of Southern Chinese is very similar.
Gotcha.
And Taiwanese, there's political reasons and historical reasons, but basically they were forced as a nation to learn Mandarin at one point, and it was actually very painful for a lot of people. So Taiwanese is spoken more locally or in the South, and a lot of people our age understand it, but they can't actually speak it. And so that's actually something kind of culturally that they're kind of overcoming, and they're trying to, a lot of people want to have Taiwanese grow, but it's difficult because so much of the world speaks Mandarin. So.
Gotcha. So you guys learn Mandarin, Chinese, and that's like the way that you guys communicate in Taiwan then.
Yeah. If you come to SYME, like we do like only English all the time because we want that to be like, it's our selling point. It's like why people come.
They're there.
But any of our outside ministries are in Mandarin.
Gotcha. Okay. So one question that popped in my head while you guys were explaining. So you were saying that when people come to the English programs, SYME, for example, they come because they're like, hey, you know what? Having multiple gods isn't a big deal. Do you find that because culturally that's kind of what they expect, that it's difficult to present Jesus through the gospel as the only way to salvation?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. I think it is a little bit of a challenge because like the Taiwanese people, like their entire life, they have one question. And it's like, who is going to sacrifice for me? And it's because like kind of like in their culture and like the primary religion is like ancestor worship. So it's like if you are a parent, like you raise a kid and you're going to give them a great education. So they're going to get a great job. So they're going to pay you lots of money. And then whenever you die, they're going to be able to like be like your afterlife insurance policy, essentially. Like they're going to burn for you and give you like offerings and stuff because that's going to be your heaven. So the better child you get, it's like the better heaven you have.
Interesting.
Or even the better, a lot of people believe they're going to kind of Taiwanese hell, but they believe they'll get out of it faster. So there's actually a lot of fear in this religion too.
Yeah. Wow. And so whenever they like hear like the story of Jesus, it actually is like a very beautiful story for them. They're like, wow, like there's this God that he's already paid the debt for me. He's already sacrificed for me. Like I don't have to do anything to earn it. Like, and like he's paid the price for me. But the scary thing is whenever we tell them like, oh, but he's actually like the only God. And that's whenever things get a little bit dicey because a lot of times if one of our students decides to be a Christian, they might even be kicked out of their family for it because their family sees it as like, you're sending me to hell because you're no longer going to worship me.
Oh, wow.
And so it's like, it's really dark and it's really sad. And it's, but it's amazing because whenever Christians like do get kicked out of their family or removed or like bad things happen, the church really has to become their family. Yeah. And so you get a lot of really sold out Christians because of that. Yeah, I was
going to ask that.
Yeah, like I feel like for us, like I have never seen like coming back to America sometimes like with long spans of time in between. Sometimes I find it kind of depressing because it's like, oh, people like I went to like Bible college with or like people that I grew up in church with, like they're no longer like walking with the Lord daily. But I have never seen like one of my Taiwanese friends that like became a believer, like decide to stop believing in Jesus. Like he becomes their everything. Yeah. And I think that's partially because in Taiwan, like the religion is like already like such a huge part of their culture. Like the religion and culture are so intertwined. So whenever you have to give a lot of that up to follow Jesus, it's like, oh, like he does become like their everything. Yeah. But yeah, it's like, it's crazy because I just think that they're like the most faithful people. Yeah.
Yeah. The culture really lends to that then. Yeah. Like you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it actually clarifies some biblical things that probably a lot of people don't think about. So like growing up my whole life, there was that thing where John 3, Nicodemus comes and Jesus is like, you must be born again. Mm-hmm. And in their culture, they can be born into that religion. And so a lot of people have this idea of, I am my parents' religion, I'm that. And we actually have a lot of people who, if their parents are Christian, think they're Christian. Mm. So Jesus comes along and he says, actually, you have to be born again. What your parents do is not good enough for your salvation. So in a culture where honoring the parents and ancestor worship is really prevalent, the idea of actually having to be born into a new family is actually a huge revolutionary idea. So something even like baptism. In America, baptism can be very beautiful, but in Taiwan, it's literally like this, it's that nervousness before jumping off of a cliff because you're actually going in front of your community. You're saying, I'm not going to worship the old gods. And there might be huge consequences and people are crying and they're handing you flowers because this is like them publicly saying, I'm not part of that culture. And that's a big difference between getting baptized and nothing changes because maybe you're so accepted in your family or you're already in your community. And so it's a kind of a different thing. And there's challenges with that as well, too, because some people might not trust that someone is a Christian unless they're baptized because that's them actually standing up for their faith. And then they start to confuse salvation with baptism. And so we do a lot of work talking through these theological ideas and being like, we understand why you feel that way, but that's not what the Bible says.
Yeah. So when you're reaching out to like the people in your community and within, these youth ministries, how many of these people come from Christian backgrounds? Because you said that some of these people, like, they have their parents are Christians. Like, what do you know the percentages by any chance?
So Taiwan's evangelical percentage is about 2%. And I would say that even if we have a lot of people who are adjacent to Christian families, it's like even if they have Christian parents, they probably don't have Christian grandparents. They probably don't have Christian friends really in Christian community. And so it's kind of hard to say, but I would say all of them are heavily exposed to idol worship, Buddhism on a daily basis. Yeah. And even if they are working a normal job, like if you go to Costco there, we have Costco. A lot of people don't believe that, but
you said it, and I didn't even process it. I'm like, Costco, you have Costco in Taiwan.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm from Kirkland, Washington, and Costco is Kirkland's signature, so I see the name of my small hometown everywhere. I'm like, that's so weird.
That's hilarious.
It's the home of Costco.
Yeah.
But we were walking there, and we saw they opened up the storage door where they kind of put like supplies to clean the place, and there's this big idol in there, and there's kind of this reality of like, if everybody at your work worships another God, what does it mean when, maybe they're going to be accepting of you not worshiping that God, but what's it mean when you work at 7-Eleven and your manager says, hey, go out and lay out the sacrifices and worship? So a lot of the things are very challenging too, because culturally, like everybody is worshiping other gods, every restaurant, every business. It doesn't matter if it's a big corporation. Starbucks I haven't seen, and McDonald, but almost everything else, I would say really like, they're going to do acts of worship at a store, and you're going to have to be in that culture and be able to not be involved with that. And so that's really challenging too, because the natural response a lot of times is to actually push away from it and say, I don't want to even know anything about that. So a lot of the Christians end up trying to really insulate themselves from that and try to create their own kind of businesses and community. But it makes it difficult because then you end up creating your own evangelism problem. You've basically created this way to protect yourself from that influence, but then you don't know anything about the people who live around you. And that's actually something we encounter a lot too.
Yeah. So like we would see like this problem with like all these Christians. We would try to like ask them about like, how do we reach the Taiwanese people? Like how do we explain their religion to us? Like we want to like learn something. So we actually started going to like a lot of their festivals, and they have festivals like all the time. Like it never stops. It's like year round. But and their festivals are crazy. Like the Matsu festival. Matsu is like the goddess of the sea. Okay. And it's she's really, really worshipped by like a lot of like fishing communities and stuff. For those of you who don't know, Taiwan's like a little island. So people really like to fish. Yeah. But
simplifies their entire lifestyle. I mean, that's what you do on an island.
You like to fish. Wrong. You like to fish.
It's a big food source, but Matsu, like she's widely worshipped around the world. But like people will literally like walk like 212 miles, like 150,000 people, like following Matsu, like the statue, as she like goes from like they bring her from like temple to temple so she could like visit the other gods and the other friends, and it's just crazy. And it's like, but we would have like never have like really like known about her or like understood like this part of the culture by asking the Christians there, because they would just be like, oh, Madzu. Okay. And I should have all the context for that. But it's like growing up in the West, like I don't have context for Madzu or like who she is or what she does. That's
wild. So I'm going to use that to transition again. Hopefully this transition is better than the last time when I just went up and just flopped it hard.
Beautiful.
No, but this time I know you guys do a lot of storytelling through video and through media. Can you guys just tell me a little bit about like your vision and your purpose behind that and how it lends to your youth ministry, your SYME and all those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to go? Yeah.
Sure. You guys can do it together.
I think whenever we were on that missions trip, like around the world, we spent a lot of times like in each different country, and we just realized there were so many like heard of stories like from people. Like we would see these missionaries doing like these incredible work, and like all this crazy stuff is happening, and like I was having experiences that I just couldn't even believe, but nobody would like believe me, or like I wouldn't even know like how to communicate this with somebody. And that was kind of like we first started like having conversations about like what media could do, like if people could actually see what was happening. And then when we fast forward and we end up like in Taiwan, like as full-time like missionaries and stuff, at first it was like really difficult because our support was actually really low. And I had a different job like at the time, like, and he was working for Word of Life, and I just, we didn't know how we were going to be able to sustain ourselves. But then we just started like filming videos, and then our support was like skyrocketing. And it's because people were like finally able to see like,
they could relate.
Yeah. Cause I could talk about Taiwan all day, but it's like, if you don't understand Taiwan or you've never been there or seen it, it's like, how can you feel it? But I think with media, you can make people feel anything. Like you could make their emotions go up or down like the plane.
Hopefully not down as bad as my transitions. So how do you guys see that translating? I mean, you guys said it like it really helps people understand and catch the vision of why you're doing what you're doing. Have you seen anybody reached in Taiwan or within the cultures you're trying to reach through media?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We actually have students who actually sit down with their grandparents or their parents and watch these videos together. And our videos, a lot of times, what we do is we'll cover something like, let's say, a Chinese folk religion subject. It might be a story or an idea. And then we'll compare that and contrast it with Christianity and kind of have a takeaway, usually with an application or how you could grow in your faith. And what they do is they're starting to use that to, first, they finally understand what their grandparents are doing. Their whole life, they've watched it. Their parents have said, we don't do that, so they've kind of had to stay away from it. And so they've been afraid to learn about it. And so a lot of them are like, I finally get it. I know why they do this.
Interesting.
And when that happens, they're able to actually sit down with their grandparents and say, hey, I have this video, let's watch it together. And we're starting to hear them they're excited to hear our videos and talk about it as a family and start opening conversations. And we have some people who've realized that their entire life, they never thought they could evangelize their family. And it's kind of really sad. It's just this thought of like, my grandparents are traditional. They're just going to die and never go to heaven, never know Jesus. That's just how it is. But it's kind of opening gateways with some people are now saying like, you know what, like I can relate to them and I can have that doorway to show them how Jesus fills a need that they never knew that they had. And so it's been really cool to see that. We get a lot of good feedback about that.
It was really cool too. Like Jake's the face of a lot of our YouTube like videos. Like,
for sure.
And
we'll go ahead and give a little plug. Pilgrimage
Films.
Oh yeah, I should tell you what it is. Yeah. He's like a lot of times like the face on the videos, and it was really crazy because it was like just a few weeks ago. Like I was in the elevator of my apartment complex, and we live on like the 20th floor of a building. Like we live like it's a major city, and I'm like in the elevator, and Jake's next to me, and then this lady gets in, and she's like. And she's just like, staring at him. And I was like, okay, maybe she just never seen a guy with a beard. I don't know.
I get stared at a lot.
But she's like, all she said was, she's like, YouTube. And she like pulls up on her phone and she like had the Pilgrimage Films like,
no way.
And she's just like showing him his video. She's like, this is you. And it was like super cool. And like, so that's happened like a couple times, like as we've, I think like videos, like we did a video like on Shang-Chi, like the character Morris, and like stuff like Marvel videos has really like helped us with the Taiwanese algorithm a little bit more. So that's kind of pushed us up. So I think people have been able to see more and more of it. So
it's just kind of funny. Like you guys, it's almost like a Trojan horse of like you're telling them about their own culture, and then you're able to insert the truth of the gospel and the truth of Christianity, right? And then, or is that not part of the videos? Or?
No, it is. We do like a whole compare and contrast section. Every video,
yeah.
it's like compare and contrast.
I think it started out as a Trojan horse. When it first started, we were like, I don't even know if I can, like, are they going to hate me for talking about their religion?
Sure.
But then we started to realize how syncretic the culture is. They like literally grab this God and this God. And if one of the things is people are so afraid that somebody will disagree with them. But the reality is if they disagree with you, you disagree with them. Like it's a two-way street. So
interesting.
We became very comfortable with the reality that like if we don't believe the same thing that they do, they don't believe the same things that we do. Therefore, like either we can both be offended or we can both talk about it.
Because you both don't agree.
Yeah. And so we don't let them say like, we don't let them put us in a corner anymore and like, shame us about it. And
I think being open about it too, it's like, it's kind of like there's no surprise. Like it's like they should already, now at this point, I feel like they're going into it knowing like, okay, they disagree like, but it's okay. Like one of our friends, like she's like a really good friend of us and her husband is not a believer and he's like super into like Taiwanese folk religion, but our friend is like a really strong believer. And so like she's always like, hey, like, honey, come watch these videos so that you could like practice your English too. And like learn, and like all our videos are translated, but it's also like a good tool if you like want to hear more English. And so like, he's totally fine with, because it's just like, okay, this is just their beliefs. But it's like, I hope that those are like seeds planted so that one day he's like, he could see the truth. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think one thing it's taught me too about cross-cultural ministry, because it's really hard to take, what we do in Taiwan and hone it in and apply it to everywhere, but it's actually more applicable than people realize, because one of the failures I think we do as Christians is look at our primary identity as secondary or third. But the reality is there's this guy, Charles Clow, and he talks about it, is that there's only really two worldviews, non-Christian and Christian. And it's a huge mistake to look at our worldviews as like you're on a train and when you turn Christian, like the train just takes a little turn and it's like my destination's changing. But the reality is the Bible says you must be born again. Your worldview and your culture is so different from that of the world that it's like you're on a train and you got to pick that train card up and move it on to completely separate, disconnected tracks.
Yeah.
So when it comes to cross-cultural ministries, one of the things I've learned and realized is that actually all of this stuff for culture applies to just even becoming a Christian. Like if you become a missionary, you go through all this stuff on culture shock and people become Christian and we don't realize how they need to learn a different language, a different vocabulary, their relationships change. Yeah. And the idea of, so culture shock, for instance, is where you have a honeymoon period, it's really great, then you feel really, really low, and then sometimes you'll balance out and you might adapt to the culture, or you might hate the culture and resist it, or you might leave the culture. And I realized that a lot of the issues we're having today with just youth is that we're not looking at their transition from non-Christian to Christian as big of a thing as it really is. We're asking them to watch different TV shows that don't have this in it because we want them to learn a different way, read different books, to learn theological things. So if you take all those cross-cultural skills that are very effective in ministry and you look at it as the difference between believer and non-believer, people have done years of research into it, and it just works so well. And that's one of the things we've started looking at is the religion of being a Taiwanese folk religion. That's a huge difference. But the reality is, like, it's just as big of a difference for a Christian in America who was once an atheist to cross over. Like, he can't do the same thing. He can't have the same relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're pulling someone from their culture no matter what. Like, we're doing a kind of a cross-cultural ministry just by being in youth ministry no matter what country we're in.
Yeah.
All youth ministry is cross-cultural, but it's intensely cross-cultural. Like, if somebody becomes a believer, you're asking them to make shifts. And the problem is if you don't identify that, you don't ask them to make a big enough shift. You don't ask them to really change their culture over. You say, keep everything about you and just know Jesus a little bit. But we're actually asking people to change their entire framework of what they understand and believe and walk through.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. That's incredible. So I just have one last question before we move into the last section here. Sorry, I'm reeling a little bit because that blew my mind a little bit. So I'm going to have to reflect on that a little bit. I'm looking forward to listening back through now. But the last question I had is, like, do you guys find that building relationships is easier or more difficult in this cross-cultural kind of setting?
Both.
Yeah.
So it's like they see us and it's like, whoa, there's a crazy different looking guy with a beard. And so on the surface level, it's actually pretty easy sometimes. But when you get deep, the differences are always going to be like clearly apparent. So if I'm in Taiwan, And this is one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about ethnic cultures is in Taiwan, they see me as a foreigner, but if my kids are born there, my kids' kids are born there, my kids' kids are born there, they're still foreigners.
Interesting.
I went to Vietnam one time, and some person told me that they were Chinese, and I was like, "Oh, cool. So when did you come here?" Like, no. We went back to like their great grandpa, and they were still.
I'm Chinese,
but they were all born in Vietnam, and it's because their ethnic identity was who they were. And so one of the things that is challenging as an American is that we are based on the same set of ideals and principles. Like, I can't go to England and be like, my great grandpa was from England, so I'm English. They'd be like, get out of here, right?
Yeah.
And so when those cultures clash, it's very difficult because we have to realize as missionaries, we will always be part of their culture in a way, but we can never really identify on the same level because to them, until there's enough probably people moving over there, or if their nation wasn't bonded by ethnic identity, then maybe. But as it stands now, I'm always going to be a foreigner. But honestly, that's, again, it just goes back to, that's really more of the Christian walk in general anyways, right?
Yeah.
We're always going to be a foreigner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Bible really even says that. We are foreigners in this land, and our citizenship is in heaven. And that's the other culture. Wow. You guys have, I mean, we've talked about bits and pieces of this. Jake and Emily and I, we kind of connect on a regular-ish basis on some media stuff around the world. And I get to hear pieces of this, but this is the first time we've all sat together in a room and talked ever, I think. I think the
first
last time
met face to face.
Yeah, I'd say you weren't even there when I met Jake at that wedding.
No, I wasn't. I was
I met Jake a long time ago at a wedding, and but yeah, I had never met you in person before. So, guys, thank you so much for this. We're gonna move now into our last segment called Small Group, and the music's vibey. We kind of chill out. It's just like in youth group. You have a really good message, and then you have that time where you kind of get to unwind and connect about just life. So we always share some funny or some encouraging stories. And I know you guys, we just talked about cross-cultural. I know you guys have some good stories about things that have happened that are outside of how I would see American culture just by being in youth ministry. And I would love to hear a story from each of you about that. And one of the things, I don't know if you guys can see, Dylan, can we see that? Yeah. One of the things in our culture is that the co-host who wasn't able to make it is actually, in our culture, crawls in the background of the other shot. That's part of all culture. I don't know if Kyle's hanging out back there. We'll connect with him after the episode. So if you're watching, if you're not
out of the shot, Josh.
Sorry, Kyle. Sorry. If you guys aren't watching, go and watch on YouTube. You'll see Kyle desperately trying to stay out of the shot. So there's a cross-cultural thing for you, I guess. So anyway, Jake, we'll let you start. I know Emily has a story that I haven't heard. I got to hear part of your story. Let's hear. Let me hear a story.
Yeah, this isn't a very long story, but this will just show you the difference. I talked a little bit earlier about how independence is a little bit delayed, but people are very mature. And I got a text message in the States where somebody sent me a prayer request, and this is not to shame someone for their prayer request.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
But culturally, it was a little bit funny.
Yeah.
They said, please pray for me. They are well into their 20s. Please pray for me that my mom will not threaten me by saying if I don't brush the toilet well, she will block my phone connection. And it's funny because, like, as much as I'd want to pray for them, I would say you should probably be able to brush the toilet good enough that your mom doesn't cut off your internet service. I'm sorry if that happens, but you really need to work on your cleaning probably.
Yeah,
so
that's silly. And that's definitely not something that I've heard before. Like, my youth guys coming in and they're like, oh man, like, I got in trouble at school and my mom took my phone away. I've never heard them talk about brushing the toilet well enough.
And especially post 20s, but that's just it's just a different world.
Well, yeah, these guys are also 13 and 14 when they come back. Yeah, so I'll give them that. So Emily, I haven't heard your story at all.
Yeah.
I have been on the edge of my seat ever since we started the podcast. I want to hear the Ronald McDonald story.
Yeah. So, like, in Taiwan, everybody loves McDonald's. Like, it's like the place to go. It's like very relevant. And
they actually don't know him as Ronald McDonald. They know him as Uncle Donald.
Yeah.
Which makes it really weird because he's still a clown, but he's just an uncle.
Uncle Donald.
But he's a clown. And then Grandpa Chicken is Colonel Sanders. So.
Grandpa Chicken.
Yes.
Beautiful. Grandpa Chicken. So let's hear the Uncle Donald story.
Yeah. So yeah, there's an Uncle McDonald, and we were at a Bible club a few weeks ago, and a Bible club is kind of like it's sort of like a youth group night we do with our students, and they all like put it on. So like there's a different team that's going to do skits, and a different team that will do games, and, and they have to like do it in English. And we're like watching like this Bible club happen, and there's like this guy that's like dressed kind of funny in the back of the room, and Jake's like, why is he dressed like that? Like, what's going on? And the whole theme of this Bible club was like creation.
Yeah.
And then the skit time comes up, and this guy that was dressed all weird, he was supposed to be the Uncle McDonald.
Yeah.
And he was the serpent snake that like for like humanity, and like their apple was instead like McDonald's French fries, and if you eat these things, you were going to become really, really fat. And it was just beautiful though, seeing like them use like their English and like, I don't know, just it was hilarious.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that was creative.
And their understanding of the McDonald's culture, which is when you eat too many other fries, you get fat.
Yeah.
No, they're right. They're absolutely right. Yeah. That's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for being a part of small group. That's actually it for us. That's been Stacking Chairs. It's all about serving in youth ministry. Guys, thanks so much for kind of just walking us through what it's like to reach another culture. And I think you've given everybody, hopefully, a lot to think about. So thank you guys so much for being a part of the podcast. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll fly you guys back from Taiwan another time.
Yeah, we'd love that.
As
High
long as
budget.
I'm not flying. Yeah, perfect. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. We'll catch you next week.